Hi, I'm Katie, and this is episode 41 of Ornamentations, which will be a little bit of everything. I've got lots to share with you today, and that includes finishes, starts, progress on my big whip. We will be looking at my Britomart casket. Thankfully, I have been stitching a great deal, and I actually have something to show for it, which is fabulous. And then I've got some haul. Great announcement. We'll be looking at the spring Flosstube kit, which I'll be showing you today. And then I have 4 fabulous giveaways at the end to share with you as well. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But we'll start off today with the reveal of the spring Flosstube kit. I think this will probably be available in early April. I have ordered all the materials, but TBD on when exactly this is coming. The chart is an old one from Brenda Gervais, Tulip Festival. I've always really liked this chart. I think it's restrained and very elegant, and I love all the tulips. I love stitching flowers, so you know I'm all about it. As I said, this is an older chart, so it's a little harder to find. Silver Needle currently has it on back order. I ordered this myself from Hobby House last year, and then you can also get this from Brenda Gervais herself when her shop is open, Country Stitches online. I'll link it in the description. So if you're interested in the spring Flosstube kit, I will not be providing the charts. I don't have a Hoffman account, so make sure to hunt this one down because it's a great stitch. I really enjoyed it, and I think it has turned out absolutely beautifully, although perhaps a little unexpected for a spring stitch. The colors might not be what you would expect, but I think it's just beautiful, and I'm very excited to show it to you. I did love reading your comments to the last episode, which was about a different project, but you guys are right. Purple and Himalayan fog are a winning combination, and I was smiling reading that because I was stitching on this at the time. And yeah, I can confirm that those two go together beautifully because this is stitched on Legacy Linen, 38 count Himalayan fog, and those are some, sorry, not level, beautiful mulberry purples. So purples with a very high red content basically. And then I've got a very, very saturated, rich, quite striking blue for the bunny's dress. I think it just, oh, it's beautiful. And the colors just sing on the Himalayan fog, which is rapidly becoming one of my favorite linens to work with because it's very light, which means you don't have to necessarily really account for it in your color choices, but there's something about it that just makes colors sing. I do have a little bit of sparkle here. That's accentuate for the tulip tops and the bunny's baskets. It's paired with a tan thread instead of a gold one so that it isn't too gold, which wouldn't really fit with the pattern. I think it's wonderfully restrained as it is. And then those rich saturated colors aren't maybe what one expects for spring, but they're beautiful. And the Himalayan fog and the rich colors just makes me think of spring flowers and spring rain. And I could enthuse all day about how much I love this color and linen combination, but I will spare you that. So we'll just take a look at the stitch, which as you can see is now finished. It's ready to FFO. And then these are the threads. So I've got my usual mixture here of Accentuate 103 Gobelins, and then rather unusually for a Flosstube kit, Paris for that blue. So if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I prefer high twist silks for my cross stitch. So Gobelins in filament silk category and 103 for a spun silk. If all of these terms are Greek to you, go watch the specialty thread tutorial part 1. It's all explained in excruciating detail. I'll link it in the description. Soie de Paris is a filament silk, so it's got wonderful shine with a lower twist than Gobelins and 103. However, if the color's right, the color's right. And here I felt the color was right, so I went for Paris. And as you can see from this stitch, you can absolutely mix high and low twists in the same project. It's not a problem. The dress does not look out of place. If you look at detail shots, you can see that the crosses on the bunny, that's Gobelins, are sharper and more defined. They're sitting a little differently on the fabric than the Paris, but it provides excellent coverage, and oh, you can't beat that really rich blue. So in that sense, it was absolutely perfect for this project. So while I have preferences, color is always my lodestar, and if the right thread exists in not a high twist, then I will go for it, and it'll still deliver beautiful results. So, you know, nothing's really a rule in stitching. You can only have preferences and guidelines, because there are always exceptions, places where you need to look elsewhere. Sorry about the rant. Anyways, Tulip Festival, absolutely beautiful, coming to you as a spring Flosstube kit. I'm not entirely sure of the launch date. If you're a spring seasonal stitcher, whether this is of interest to you or not, please weigh in the comments. When do you start your spring stitching, and when are you interested in having a kit, whether you want Tulip Festival or not? The materials are on order, they're just not in yet, so can't confirm a launch date. I'm thinking probably early April, because I know market's coming up and we're all going to be having our attention and our funds going to that. So that's Tulip Festival, and let's go to my FFO, which is the sparklified finish of something I showed you in the last episode. That was my Bijoux stitched motif from Modern Folk Embroidery Through the Bitter Frost and Snow. Perfect for today. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone, as this is a lovely little stitchy Valentine. Stitchy and sparkly. So I did the crystal hanger as seen here previously on my Prairie Schooler Santa. This time I used rounds, although I think it'd be really interesting to mix the two shapes in one really bodacious hanger. Wouldn't that be awesome? And then just did this as a simple little ornament. Unfortunately, you can't see the sparkle from the video for the whole spiel on Bijoux. This was discussed in the previous episode, number 40. It's a beautiful thread to cross stitch with, and it's got this wonderful shimmer to it. It just doesn't show on camera, so I have to take my word for it. Or Laura, the serial starter, who also tried it out and loved it, as I'm sure many of you saw. And then the back is a lovely, rich burgundy silk. This is from Mood. I'll be linking it in the description. I know many of you have gotten interested in silk satin for backing or adding to your stash. That's a wonderful thing to have because it coordinates beautifully with all the dark reds and the Avera Soie lines. So highly recommended, and I'm loving the crystal hangers, so I'll be looking to do that. It also has this really satisfying jingle to it. I love that. I'm weird, whatever. And then we'll move to my other start. Well, my one start. I only have one start. And that is what we were discussing in the last episode, which is Modern Folk Embroidery's Home Sweet Home. And when I filmed the episode, the dilemma was real. However, as much as I appreciated everybody's input, I feel awful because I came to a decision before the episode went live. Once I reviewed the footage, which I always do, I write the notes when I'm watching just to make sure I don't miss anything. And I saw this combination together. I just thought, oh, that's it. So you all were right. Gobelins 575, the aubergine purple, was definitely the thread. There were votes for every thread in combination in the comments last episode, but this was the most popular thread choice. The most popular ground choice was the gray Himalayan fog, which for very good reason, because purple looks amazing on it. However, what really spoke to me when I saw the video was Russian tea cake. And this is my start. So this won't really be a focus piece for me going forward, but I did want to start and hopefully I think convey you what I saw in the combination. So this is got the top border in. I started to carry it down, and then yeah, I'm not very far, but I think you can see what I like. It's really dramatic. So you get all the subtlety of the aubergine thread, but then the really high contrast, and it's just very, very striking and beautiful. I think this is going to be a very stunning piece once it's finished, although it would also look great on Himalayan fog. I hope somebody does try that and shares their stitch, because that would also be beautiful. It has been a little bit cursed as a stitch because, as you can see, I'm not very far, and yet I've already had two fairly significant mistakes, one of which I decided to live with and one of which I frogged. So all of the corners in the border are, but one, are fudged on this chart. I believe that was deliberate, as Jacob wrote that he was inspired by the borders on the 18th century samplers in the collection of the V&A. And you did generally see schoolgirls fudging their borders, especially in the corners. And Jacob is just too good at design to do this kind of thing by accident. So I'm going to go with that was a deliberate design choice to honor his historic inspiration. As you can see, nothing quite, well, that one does, but they're all just a little weird in the corners. So bad me. I was working on the border, carrying it along. I knew I was almost at the corner, but I was gabbing with a friend, and I just kept on carrying my repeat. So I ended up with an extra cross on that leaf in the corner because I had kept on going, realized my mistake, hastily took it out, but that one cross was at the end of my previously ended thread, and I was not going to unpick the whole thing just to remove one little cross. So the leaf's a little wonky, but you can't see it, so I'm good with that. My bigger problem was that I worked the whole top border and then decided to go down so I could start the house, which meant placing the letters correctly relative to the border. And on that, you have one job, right? No. I started with the A, and I managed to place the A one stitch off. Normally, that's the kind of thing I would live with. However, since this is a perfectly symmetrical pattern, that means there'd be unequal distance between the perfectly symmetrical motifs, and it would just drive me absolutely nutty. So I decided to frog it and start over. So I'm now in the house, and the letters about in the position that I was when I realized the mistake I had made. This is now correct. However, I had a real moment when I realized what I had done. I was trying to decide whether or not I could live with the mistake. Normally I do, but something being off in a symmetrical sampler, I know that would just drive me insane forever. And I wasn't that far along that it would kill me to redo it. So I redid it, and I'm very happy that I did. You might also notice the date that it's 2023, Katie, not 2016. Yeah, Jacob mentioned in his introduction to the pattern that this would be a wonderful housewarming piece to stitch for yourself or for another, and 2016 was the year I moved into my house, so I put 2016 on there to commemorate the place in which I live. So, a little late to be a housewarming, but you know, whatever. So I'm really enjoying this. It's an engaging stitch. As I said, I think you said, it's probably not going to be a focus piece for me, but it's an interesting mental exercise because With the very dark thread and the very light ground, you have to be very careful about your stitch path to make sure that you're always going behind stitching and not behind exposed linen threads. So my habits are usually pretty good on that. For example, I always start and stop letters and numbers individually. So even down there on the ends where you're just going over one stitch, those are not carried. But it's more interesting on the border to make sure that you're going cleanly between things and taking the most efficient stitch path. So in that sense, it's been a good mental exercise. And I think good mental preparation for an upcoming project, which is what we'll talk about next. So in the last episode, we talked about my interest in 17th century band samplers, that I've had an idea for a big start after I finished my Bride Mark casket. Oh, you guys, this idea is getting bigger and more out of control by the day. I don't know what I'm getting myself into. I think I'm digging myself a giant hole, actually, is what I'm doing. But I'm pretty excited. I think it's going to be cool. I'm excited to share with you what I'm cooking up once I actually know what that looks like. And so in the last episode, we had a chart parade of what I had so far on 17th century band samplers. I did have my order from Essamplaire come in, and there are some real winners in here. So I'm going to share those with you today. And the first one is Margreet Lucun, 1681. This is a mixed band sampler that combines white work with polychrome band work, and interestingly, all of the polychrome band work is pretty much needle lace. And also, I love the vivid color choices. The bright red, blue, green dominating it is just very, very striking. Points to Margreet for a very, very high impact sampler. So that one I loved. I had to have that. And then the next one, and this is really just as a keepsake because this isn't design-wise one of my favorites, but this is Martha Edlin 1668. It's in the collection of Victoria and Albert, and this is the first of her two band samplers. So Martha Edlin is a very famous name because she stitched a polychrome band sampler, which is what we're looking at right now. She stitched a whitework cut sampler. Then she stitched a casket with full assortment of needlework smalls, and then finally a beadwork box, which was her needlework education start to finish. And very unusually for the time, it's all survived together with her name, because while it's very common for stitchers to put their names on their samplers, it almost never happened with caskets. And for an entire needlework education group to survive together is almost unheard of. So Martha Edlin is the original gangster of 17th century schoolgirl stitching. For that reason, I'm a big Martha fangirl, so I had to have the chart for her sampler, even if I don't think this is going to be a part of my project. She's awesome. So I'll link to the V&A website on Martha's collection, and it's very interesting because you can see a needlework education in that century start to finish. So a girl would have started with a polychrome band sampler. From there, if she had an interest, she might have continued to a whitework sampler. If she was very advanced and interested and had the funds, then she would have gone on to a casket, and from there, very, very few seemingly went on to beadwork. So you know that Martha was not only interested, skilled, and had the resources to do all of that, but that she was uniquely talented as a needleworker for her age, because there are a lot of caskets, but there isn't a lot of surviving beadwork from that era. So that could just be survival bias. We don't know that that was everything that was made during that period, but that's the implication. It's always hard to know with so many centuries in between what was made versus what survived. And then the last chart I have to share with you is one of my favorites, and this is from the collection of the in Scotland, and this is Jane Turner, 1668. It bears a marked resemblance to the sampler that's on the cover of the Whitney Antiques book. That's a whole style of samplers, and there are multiple surviving examples. The Lady Amongst Trees, and this one just has some really great bands. They don't use particularly complicated techniques, but they're very, very, they're just beautifully designed, complex, and very interesting. So Jane Turner, 1668 is what Nicole would call a Bobby Dazzler of a sampler. This one I think is the best of the ones I have recently ordered. And then I also have a couple of really great books to share with you that comprise the rest of my haul. So in trying to get up to speed on 17th century band samplers to prepare for this project, I've been speaking with a couple of friends who are experts in this area. Disclaimer, I know a fair amount about 17th century schoolgirl needlework, but I am weakest on samplers. I know considerably more about caskets and needlework smalls. So I'm familiar with the techniques, the threads, the stitches, but I know the least about the sampler, and so I've had a couple of friends step in and help me. Some of that has been recommending books, and I'm sharing these with you in case you're also interested. Lots of eye candy, which is the other reason I'm sharing them with you. So these were two of the books I was told I must have if you either have any kind of interest in the 17th century band sampler. And the first is Sampled Live Samplers from the Fitzwilliam Museum by Carol Humphrey. She has actually written two books on the samplers at the Fitzwilliam Museum. The smaller one, which I already had, is appropriately called Samplers. This is just a small general overview. Oh, look at that great photo on the back. So this is just kind of a very brief primer. The real gem is Sampled Lives, which focuses more on 17th century band samplers, but oh my God, can somebody reproduce this? Are they clowns? There's definitely a castle. This is great. Love that motif. And this one has a lot of great information, but also some just beautiful photos. Some great close-ups, and those allow you to get a good look at the threads. So this is filament silk. Again, filament versus fun discussed in the specialty thread tutorial part 1. And you can see, the wonderful details in the stitches. And some of these have survived with a lot of intact color because you see so many faded samplers. So in these, the linen is colored. This is what linen looks like as it ages. It takes on color fairly evenly unless there's been water, moisture, mildew damage of some kind. And then you can see just how vibrant those colors were. This is very, very typical of 17th century schoolgirl needlework. We tend to see colors that are faded today, but if you see an unfaded example, or if you look at the back, you see rich, vibrant color. So Sampled Lives is currently in print, which makes it one of the more affordable sampler books out there. Unfortunately for Americans, it's available from the Fitzwilliam, and the book price is reasonable, but they charge you as much as the book price for shipping because for some reason you can only have it sent priority international. I didn't really need 2-day service on this, but definitely worth it. It's a wonderful book. I'll link it in the description. And then the other really great book that came in, considerably less affordable, but I can see why I was told I needed to have this. And this is an out-of-print needle print publication. They did all the really expensive ones that everybody now pays a fortune for. The Feller collection, the Ackworth School book. This is called The Good Heart Samplers. It's the hardback covering a private collection that was left to the National Trust. So here you can see what I was talking about, faded colors. This is more often what we see when looking at a 17th century piece today. However, what I just showed you in sampled lives is what these pieces originally looked like. And some of the pieces in Good Heart collection are remarkably unfaded, and you see those rich, vibrant colors in them. So the Good Heart samplers, like sampled lives, goes from spot samplers to band samplers, and then has a smaller section on later samplers. But the real treasures are all the fabulous 17th century band samplers. There is so much eye candy in here. They have some great close-ups that let you get a better look at techniques and threads. Oh, I love this one. It's got wonderful needle lace. Oh, isn't that beautiful? That one is just spectacular. This is Hester Sisson's 1659. So the Good Heart samplers. This put a real dent in my wallet, but I can't say that I regret it, having seen, I haven't actually managed to read all the text yet, but ooh, eye candy. So those are two wonderful books if you're at all interested in 17th century band samplers. They were highly recommended by some friends, as I mentioned, who are experts in this area and were able to guide me. And then my other purchase, which isn't here yet, is Sarah Rayner, which is the Needle in a Haystack exclusive chart to celebrate their 25th anniversary. As you know, if you've been watching my channel for a while, Needle in a Haystack is my LNS. So lucky to have them. It's an amazing store. Kathy, the owner, is a wonderful person who I count as a friend. So I don't think I'm gonna stitch Sarah Rayner. I've got a very big project coming down the pipeline, but you know, I had to have it just to celebrate Needle in a Haystack and to celebrate Kathy. And it is actually quite an engaging design, very emblematic of Berlin work from that period. With that, we're going to get to my very big whip. So I'm going to move everything away so I don't mess up my big slate frame, and we will look at Britom Art. And now we come to my really big whip, which is my Britom Art casket. We last saw this in episode 39, where I brought you up to date on the current status of the casket, if you'd like to go back and see that. And then I have some good progress on the back to show you, which was what I will do now. We'll read this design very quickly first. So 7 figures. When I showed this to you last, I had worked the frieze and then the drapes behind the figures, and that was where I was. Just general disclaimer before I hold this up, I'm going to do my best to hold this up level and steady for long enough that you can see it, but given the size of the frame, that's a little difficult. So have the pause button ready if there's something you really like to see. It is extremely awkward to hold this thing up in front of a camera and try and hold it steady. One thing, I can't even see what the camera is saying because it's blocking my face. So as you can see, I have finished the ground beneath the figures, and this is a wonderful textured needle lace pattern that gives a very defined zigzag. Isn't that cool? I absolutely love it. It's a little hard. Okay, that's where I think you get the clearest view. It's very defined in life, but it's washing out a little bit with all the light in here. So the needle lace patterns are covered in Cabinet of Curiosities Part 2 stump work, which, side note, huge announcement, that is back and it is currently open for registration. That's where I learned all of this. So if you're curious about caskets, about stump work, about needle lace, you cannot do better than Cabinet of Curiosities Part 1 stump work. Not a page for thistle threads. It's just, that was the end all be all of my needlework education. So I'm a big booster for it. Made me the stitcher I am today, true story. So back to Britomart, finished the ground, which meant I could proceed to the figures, which are what's really interesting on this panel. It depicts the Mask of Cupid, which meant I get to stitch all these people wearing very elaborate costumes. That's why I picked this scene for the back, actually. Fancy there in the middle is wearing all feathers. How fun is that? So this is the Mask of Cupid, and the figures depicted are fear, hope, fancy, desire, and doubt. And then we've got the captive Amoret on one side and then her rescuer Britomart on the other. We'll start with Britomart and then move on to Amoret. So Britomart is still in progress, and I have finished the needle lace of her arms and legs, which is supposed to look like chainmail. It's lightly padded over the ground so that her legs are raised enough that you can see them, and then flattens out as you move up the figure because this panel is supposed to be more flat than raised. I mean, if this were all detached, I'd be working on this well into next year. I've finished the long and short stitch for her cape underneath her figure, and then the understitching for her skirt, which will get needle lace to go over it. I know that you can work a figure that starts out flat, starts out raised and then becomes flat, because I did the same thing with Britomart on the lid, which I've got upside down. So there again, her legs are padded to raise her over the textured ground, and then she flattens out to be completely flat at the top. So the theory is much the same as it is on the lid here. Just that way. And then, oh, I was going to show you that the colors are supposed to echo what I did for her on the front. So I've tried to make Britomart a little different on every panel because it'd be so boring to stitch the same thing repeatedly, but that they have enough continuity that you can tell that this is the same character over and over. So proceeding with the rest of Britomart is my next task on this, and then we'll take a look at the finished Amoret, or we will try to. This might be a little difficult. I can't see a thing here. So I hope you're seeing Amoret. And she is a callback to the Fenton House casket. So if you're familiar with that casket, which is one of my favorites, there is a woman on the front in a blue dress with pink drapes, although in very different shades, in a similar pose. So that's why I chose to draw Amoret this way for the back panel. And then you see her, she's captive, she's under enchantment, so that's chains are indicating her captivity, and then her heart bleeding into the bowl symbolizes the enchantment. In the book it's actually a little more graphic. She's got her open bleeding chest, but I thought we could dispense with that for the back. It's a little distracting. And then this is all long and short stitch and filament silk, which is what gives it that wonderful, wonderful shine. And as you can, the reason I'm waving this back and forth is you can not only see the shine, but you can see how the colors change depending on how the light hits the silk. That's one of the magic things about filament silk. And I've used 3 different types of gold here. She's got a very, very fine gold called gilt on 6 ends silk for her hair. And then a fine antique flatworm with number 10 gilt pearl for her handcuffs. And then that's a modern number 4 gilt passing for the bowl that holds her bleeding heart at her feet. Yes, that is missing a blood drop. That's because it goes over the cloak of the figure of, I think that's fear? No, sorry, doubt. And so that has to be stitched before that little last missing drop of blood can go over it. Stump work is always about order of operations, making sure that things are worked in the correct order. So that's Amoret. She turned out really well. I'm quite pleased. She does have one missing piece, and that's the veil coming out of her hair. So there's so much texture in the drapes that it wasn't feasible to work that directly on the ground. So I'm making this as a separate piece of needle lace. And then once I'm finished with the rest of the stitching, I will attach this and that'll complete Amarette there. So that's the Britomart casket, which is, oh, it's coming along. This is real progress. I feel like we're getting there. If I can get Britomart done, then I'll have 2 of the 7 figures done, as well as all of the background stitching. So I may in fact finish this year, or I don't know, maybe even sooner than that. Wouldn't that be cool? So I'm quite pleased. And I hope that we will be seeing this again quite soon. I did remember that I forgot to show you something else in the casket when I showed it to you last, and that's the interior. It's quite plain, so just vibrant pink silk. But if you lift up the tray, I've put mirrors in the sides and then pink silk at the bottom. So if you put smells in here, it just reflects and dazzles. And this is something that you do occasionally see in historic caskets, and it's very cool. So I knew I wanted to do that on one of mine. And as the interior of this casket was otherwise plain, I thought that was the perfect place to do it. So that's the Britomart casket. I hope that we will be seeing it again quite soon. But let's end, as this is the last thing I have today, with the giveaway for today. So as I mentioned in, I think this was the episode on Katie's Sparkle Prim, I was doing a lot of the ornaments on Cloister Cream because I had all of these long narrow remnants. So you can see relative size here. You've got about 1 inch clearance on either side for Prairie School or Santa, more for a smaller ornament. Cloister Cream. I said I was trying to use these all up, but honestly, I've got so many, I never can. So I thought I would share these with you, and to make it worthwhile and not just like, hey, I gave you my linen scraps, I am including a spool of silk with each. This is 103 707, which is the green I've been using on Katie's Sparkle Prim. There are 4 sets of this, and then each one will include a long narrow remnant of Cloister Cream, a spool of 103 707, and we'll have the keyword for this be sparkle, since I have loved using this for Sparkle Prim. And I hope you'll be doing your own Sparkle Prim on these, but anything you want. It's really only suitable for ornament size, but you can probably get at least 3 ornaments out of one of these, as long as you're comfortable with narrow margins. So if you'd like to enter the giveaway, the keyword is sparkle, and I will draw 4 winners for the next episode in 2 weeks. Good luck. That's all that I have today. So for next time, I hope to have more progress to share on my current whips. We'll be getting back to Santa Stops Here. I didn't show that today, as I have done exactly nothing on it. I was waiting for some thread. See if I can do anything more on Home Sweet Home. Hopefully Britomart as well. I might have finished our Lady Warrior. And then I think some good haul, because I know I heard the mail while I was filming. So I'll see you again in 2 weeks, and until then, happy stitching.